Welcome to our unique local elections speed debating event where we try to bring democracy to life and empower you, the voters. My name's Rory Francis from the Our Bright Future and Stand for Nature programmes led by Woodland Trust Wales. And I have only 3 tasks today. Firstly, I want to thank the National Lottery Community Fund for making this event possible through funding the project. Yn ail, dwi eisiau ymddiheuro bod y digwyddiad hwn yn Saesneg yn benna, ond mi fydd y wefan pwysig iawn y byddai'n sôn amdano fo nes ymlaen yn gwbl ddwyieithog. I've just said I want to apologise that most of this event will be in English, but the very important website that I'll be talking about at the end will be fully bilingual. But third, I want to introduce our host for tonight, one of Wales's youth climate ambassadors, Poppy Stowell-Evans, someone who I have to say has a lot more experience of chairing events like this than I do. So I give you Poppy Stowell-Evans.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm really excited and really grateful to be hosting this speed hustings, and most importantly I'm really excited that as young people we're going to have the opportunity to listen to what candidates think about the climate and nature crisis in this election, because it's completely essential when informing our votes. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Poppy, I'm 17 and I use the pronoun she, her, and I'm chair of an organisation known as the Youth Climate Ambassadors for Wales. And we're an organisation based in the fundamental of amplifying the youth voice and empowering climate action. And I'm really excited as well to be here representing and working with the Wildlife Trust Wales. Now, the reason for this event today is because ultimately we are in a nature crisis. And whilst as individuals we all have power to act, the answer to a lot of our frustrations as young people, the answer to a lot of the act. When I say that, I do not mean it just lies in the hands of international governments or of the UK government or even the Welsh government. It also lies in the hands of local authorities, which is why when we vote for our new local authorities in just 4 weeks' time, our vote is so important because the action they take impacts us on an everyday level. And so because of this, lots of young people want to use this election as a chance to make a difference. And I think that's incredible, especially given that 16 and 17-year-olds now have the vote in Wales. It is so important that you use your vote and use it to amplify your voice and influence democracy. And therefore, I'm delighted to say that we have representatives from all the major parties here tonight who are young people standing for the election. This is their chance to say what they will do to tackle the climate and nature crisis, and importantly, it's your chance to ask them questions. At the end of the meeting, we'll explain how you can use our website to ask questions of the candidates standing for election in your ward to help you decide who you vote for. Now, before I go into the layout of tonight's event, I really want to highlight, before I introduce the candidates, that the Wildlife Trust Wales has organised this event because Wales is one of the most nature-depleted countries, with 1 in 6 species at risk of extinction. They believe that our local authorities are not doing enough to tackle the nature crisis, and this is your chance to ask candidates about this. To the young people or to the people watching this video, I want you to know that your say in this election and your vote matters. And your vote matters because not only does it mean that you will influence democracy, as I said, it means that you will influence real action. When you vote with the climate crisis in mind, when you vote with the nature crisis in mind, when you cast your ballot, that means you're casting it in a way that will impact not only today's generation, but future generations. When you vote considering the climate in your decision making, which you're doing by being here at today's event, it means that you are considering the planet and the well-being of future generations in your decision making. And that is so important. So I really hope you enjoy tonight's event. We're going to start in a moment by handing over to each of the candidates, where they will give 2-minute speeches, letting you know a little bit more about them, what they stand for and what they believe. And this is a really good chance for you to understand the principles of each candidate and what they represent. We will then be passing over to questions that have already been decided before this event for about 20 minutes. And then after that, we will be opening to ask your own questions, which is so important because you're going to have the chance to ask questions to people who will literally be making the decisions in local authorities potentially in a few weeks' time. We have young candidates tonight from Labour, the Conservatives, Plaid Cymru, the Liberal Democrats, and unfortunately our Independent and Green Party representative haven't been able to make it. Each will have, as I mentioned, 2 minutes to explain. Now, before I introduce our lovely candidates, the final reminder is that the most important thing to remember is that this event has been designed for you, for young people, for the participants. Although we do have some questions prepared, please use the opportunity to ask your own questions. Type them in the chat on YouTube and remember, in order for this to work, you have to be signed in. We really want to know your questions, so please make sure you follow the correct format. Now, I'm going to introduce our candidates, and the first candidate I will be introducing to give their 2-minute speech is Councillor Danisha Patel, who is a representative of the Labour Party.
Hi, Poppy. Thank you. Thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. Shall I start? Yeah. So I'm Councillor Danisha Patel. I'm representing or looking to represent Ogmore Vale, which is one of the wards in Bridgend County Borough. And I think, like Poppy has said, nature is a beautiful gift that we've had, and I think it's our duty to protect it, as well as share it with future generations and also other people from elsewhere that would love to come to Wales, because we have some of the most diverse and interesting geography there is. I live in the Welsh Valley and it's stunning, you know, even on a miserable day like this, it's beautiful. And I think part of what we as Labour councillors do is we work with Welsh Government in partnership to make those decisions that are often difficult, but they help protect the environment and residents. You know, for example, during the pandemic, we were there at the front line making decisions that helped protect residents. And, you know, we want to create a fairer, stronger and greener community. Another thing I'd like to say is that as a councillor, you do have the opportunity to make a difference in your community. I personally have led on regeneration of the old washery site. So Ogmore is one of the mining villages, and there was a site which has been contaminated for years because obviously they were washing coal there, and we've now made it into diversity and natural habitat for a lot of wildlife. And I believe that there's interesting creatures there that only exist in those habitats. And I think for me personally, it's fascinating. And I do think that those sorts of interesting areas, those niche areas, need to be protected and welcomed and shared with residents. You know, it's not obvious, you know, little bugs, it's not obvious, but when someone acknowledges them, people are more mindful of what they are and where they can be found. I can see them. Shall I? Is that my 2 minutes?
Yes, maybe wrap up what you're saying, if that's okay.
Yeah. So I think so I do think as councillors you can make a difference, and you can make a difference in terms of the environment. I personally have, and I think other councillors can say the same thing in their areas. We've made the case for investment in forgotten areas that people don't often look at, and so so I think that's something that I would like to bring to the debate.
Amazing. Thank you so much for giving that insight into your beliefs and the work you've already done. It's so important to see the climate being centred in decision making. So the next representative I'm going to pass over tonight is Councillor Joel Williams, who is a representative of the Conservative Party. Joel, over to you.
Thank you, Poppy. It's great to be here this evening at the virtual Wildlife Trust's Wales hustings. I think what I'd like to say just from the start is that I've been in politics for 13 years, joined in 2009, and I've realised that politicians really need to listen to the public more. And when we listen to the public, one of the things that the public tell me is that on the climate emergency and the nature emergency, they want to see politicians working together. They don't want to see party division get in the way of policy and progress. So for me, I would like to see, following the local elections, politicians from across the political divide working together to address some of the significant challenges that we are facing and will continue to face. We are stewards of our planet. We're there to look after it. We're there to guard it. We're there to protect it for future generations. I mean, I live in Cardiff, capital city of Wales. It's a beautiful country, Wales. You know, in Cardiff, you're 30 minutes away from the beach or 30 minutes away from the mountains. We've got a glorious country and we should treasure it and protect it. Now, I'm looking forward to taking the questions from viewers and from people who have submitted questions. I'm Joel Williams. I'm councillor for Pomprenae and Old St Mellons on Cardiff Council, currently Cardiff's youngest councillor, hoping to be re-elected in 4 weeks' time. And I'm really hoping that there will be more younger councillors elected. It's really important that we have youth voices at the heart of decision-making here in local government. So I'm not going to take up any more of your time because I want to get on to the questions. So back to you, Poppy.
Thank you so much. Yes, youth voice and universal action is something I'm sure a lot of young activists feel is important. So the next representative I'm going to hand over is Dewi Jones, who is representing Plaid Cymru today.
Hi, very glad to be here. So yeah, my name's Dewi and I'm standing in Gwynedd in North Wales. So the climate emergency is at the forefront of the political debate today, and that's rightly so. But the reality is our environment has been neglected for decades and our politicians have been too slow to react. We are now approaching damage that's irreversible and we need to be acting hard and fast. As a result, nature is also facing an emergency. Both the climate and nature emergencies go hand in hand. The climate emergency is causing the nature emergency, and in many ways, the climate emergency cannot be addressed without also addressing the nature emergency. It's a vicious cycle that needs to be broken. Planting trees and restoring nature is one way which we can go about reducing the levels of carbon emissions. Nature also plays its part in preventing flooding, which has blighted communities' length and breadth of Wales in recent years. Nature is vital in ensuring that we as humans have food on our plates and are able to survive. Without bees and other pollinators, our food supply would simply run out. This is why Plaid Cymru has been calling for a Nature Act that will formally declare a nature emergency and will set a statutory duty with legally binding targets to restore biodiversity in both our terrestrial and marine environments. In Gwynedd, where I live, we have already been victim to these effects. Llanberis, Pontsnewydd have suffered from flooding. Just last month, there were large waves of fires on Mynydd Mawr, risking nearby homes and destroying habitats. And in South Meirionydd, whole communities are facing being retaken by the sea and becoming some of the world's first climate refugees. The climate and nature emergencies are already causing us problems. Until we do more to reverse the damage that we have caused, these problems will simply only get worse. So simply, unless we sort out these issues now, it will undoubtedly lead to catastrophe and to the end of civilization. Tinkering around the edges won't do anymore. We've got to take real action now.
Thank you very much for those sentiments for taking real action. I appreciate everyone sticking to the time so far as well. This is going great. And finally, I'm going to hand over to Glyn Preston, who will be representing the Liberal Democrats tonight.
Hello, my name's Glyn. I'm standing for the Welsh Liberal Democrats in Llanidloes, my hometown in Powys. I live in probably one of the greenest counties in Wales. I haven't fact checked that, but yeah, it's definitely obviously true. I think you know, and you know, with it being a green county, I think we should also put green issues in Powys County Council as a priority, and it should be across all sectors of local government. That should mean planning, economic development, and operations, etc. And actually, I'm really excited, if elected on May the 5th, that I'd be able to work with a bigger group of Liberal Democrats in Powys who have been at the forefront of passing the climate emergency motion and attempting to bring an ecological emergency motion to the council. And I suppose lastly, I'd just like to echo Poppy's words about getting involved and about how important it is to you know, get involved in events like this and cast your ballot, but also, you know, politics doesn't just stop after May the 6th. I mean, it doesn't just kick off again in 5 years' time. And And actually, there's lots that we can do by writing to our elected officials and lobbying them to make positive changes. So thanks ever so much, and I'm really looking forward to fielding some questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I believe those are all of our initial speeches from our candidates. So now we are going to move on to a question section of the event. So firstly, just to summarise what we heard there, we got to know what the candidates stood for. We've been able to understand the vast ways that we can impact climate action, from economic responsibility to working universally. And so now, when focusing on questions, I'm going to go to the candidates in the same order, and you will have 1 minute to answer each question to ensure that we can get through as many as possible. So my first question this evening is, what will you do to ensure that young people's voices are heard and informing local decision making? So Denisha, can I go to you first, please?
Yeah. So we currently have a youth council in Bridgend, and I think they're really good champions for what young people want and what their priorities are, and we always listen to them. And so I think getting them involved in decision making is really important for us. We also have in our schools, we have school councils. They all come together and they do campaigns on a local level, and we try and take part in as many as we can. We highlight them through the council comms. You know, we have a Love It, Don't Trash It scheme, which is going around all the schools talking about keeping their local area in good nick, you know, where they're talking about littering, and they come up with these posters, and then through the council we are using those to promote not littering. And I think those are sorts of schemes that we are doing to make sure that young people's voices are listened to. We also do things like work with the school councils to do environmental audits of the school. So there is a lot of stuff going on, and we really do value and respect young people and their opinions, and we'd love to hear from them.
Amazing, thank you so much. So I'll now be handing over to Joel Williams, answering the same question.
Thank you, Poppy. It's very important that as an elected official that I listen to the views of young people, and that's not just young people who are able to vote in an election. It's very important to listen to young people of primary school age and secondary school age. So since my election as a councillor, I've gone into schools, I've listened to the views of children and young people, and then I have fed back those concerns to council officers, to councillors, not just in my own political party, but councillors who are actually in control of Cardiff Council. It's important that young people know that they can come to an elected official regardless of the political party that they represent, and can have assurance and confidence that their concerns will be listened to and that I will be acting on their concerns. Now, in terms of getting more young people involved, it's really important that we as young representatives encourage young people to stand, to get involved. We've heard from the previous spokesman, school councils and youth councils are a fantastic way for doing that, but I think we need to cast our nets further afield and try to appeal to as many as possible. 57 seconds, I think.
That was excellent timing. Thank you very much for that answer. Dewi Jones, over to you. The same question as before. And for a reminder for our audience, that is, what will you do to ensure that young people's voices are heard and informing local making?
Yeah, like Denisha said earlier, so youth councils, at the moment, unfortunately, we don't have a youth council in Gwynedd, but after the election, that's something that Plaid Cymru is very keen to be setting up. So if I get elected, that's something I'd definitely be reminding the council of, that we really do need to give young people a platform to use their voices. But this election is a very special election. It's the first time in local government that 16 and 17-year-olds are given the votes. And I'm hoping this is going to show young people that they do have a voice, that the voice does count. Because at the end of the day, a vote of a 16-year-old is exactly the same worth as a vote of a 66-year-old. So I'd really encourage young people to go out to vote. Young people who are listening here today will probably be going out and voting. So it's really important that you're speaking to your friends. But also, I think if elected, I'd be the youngest councillor on Gwynedd. So having young people in the chamber on the council is definitely going to put young people's views at the forefront of the council.
Amazing, thank you very much for your answer. And finally, over to Glyn for the Liberal Democrats.
Yeah, I think that's an issue across Wales actually, and I think probably bring down the average age of the group of my political party in Powys County Council as well. And actually, I think it's really important that I'd be interested in doing as much as I possibly could to help young candidates get elected in my party, because actually that kind of changes the conversations, and I think also in terms of getting young people involved, I think it's just about communicating effectively with young people. So sure, that's going into schools and engaging with young people like that, but also through social media, survey work, etc. So I think it's just about making yourself accessible and open to have those conversations. Thanks ever so much.
Amazing, thank you. Now for our next question, I believe I'm going to be handing over to James, who is a member of the North Wales Wildlife Trust Youth Forum. Over to you.
Hello, yes. And my question today is, if elected, would you vote for your council to declare a nature emergency?
Yes. We already have declared a environmental climate change emergency. So I would 100% support a nature emergency.
Awesome. Brilliant. Thank you.
Short and sharp.
Yeah. Awesome. On to the next.
Yes, thank you. Next, over to Councillor Joel Williams, please.
Thanks, James, for the question. I think what is really important is that as politicians, we can grandstand. So I could stand up in the council chamber and say, you know what, we have got significant challenges with the climate and nature. Let's declare an emergency. And it might get me some good headlines. People might say, oh, Joel Williams is standing up in the council chamber. But actions speak louder than words. Now, in Cardiff, we declared a climate emergency, I think, just before lockdown. So it would have been about 2.5 years ago. We haven't really changed much. And that's the concern. If we are going to be declaring emergencies, we need to follow it up with action and not proceed on the basis as if we have never declared a climate emergency. So yes, it's important that we do make those statements, but it's important we follow them up. Actions speak louder than words.
Thank you very much. Dewi Jones, Plaid Cymru.
Yes, definitely I would vote for it, and I'm pretty sure that Gwynedd has already declared the climate and the nature emergency. Like Joel said, actions are louder than words, so that's why Plaid Cymru-led Gwynedd Council has just published a 41-page document titled Climate and Nature Emergency Plan, which outlines how Gwynedd is going to tackle these issues over the next 10 years. So yes, definitely, and I'm very glad to see that we are starting to do things in Gwynedd already.
Amazing. You guys are doing a fantastic job at keeping to the timing on this question. And finally, over to Glyn for the Liberal Democrats.
I'm afraid my answer might be rather short and sweet as well on this one. I think the answer is absolutely yes. And my group have already tried to bring forward an ecological emergency to Powys County Council. Unfortunately, it was voted down by the councillors in administration. But let's hope that there's a bigger group of Welsh Liberal Democrats on Powys County Council and across the country, so that we can take action on.
Amazing, thank you so much. So our next question is, what would you do about the state of decline of nature and its impact on an entire generation's mental health? So this question is in reference to the nature emergency and something that we now know as climate anxiety. So Councillor Danisha, over to you.
Thanks, Poppy. Sorry, what would you do? So I think for me, the fact that nature is so important with mental health. I think we realised it during the pandemic, when people were accessing nature all of the time, because we were able to only go within a certain amount of distance from your house. So here in Ogmore, we have a wonderful cycle path, and it was well used during the pandemic. And I think for me, I think sustainability requires a bigger conversation. I think that sorry, I've forgotten the question.
No, all. It should be on your screen. What would you do about the state of decline of nature and its impact on an entire generation's mental health? So the nature emergency and climate anxiety within the younger generation.
Yeah, so like I was saying, so during the pandemic, it was very obvious that nature has a role to play in with mental health, and I think what we need to be doing now is making sure that people have access to green open spaces more closer to home. I think that people need to be given the ability to access those spaces, but also we should be working with the third sector and organisations such as the Ramblers UK, who do excellent work around getting people to access those rights of ways that often get closed down. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done around it, but I think because of the pandemic, I do think that it's at the forefront of people's minds now, and it is our duty, once elected, to make sure that we do push that agenda forward, and we make sure that people are putting those together, nature and mental health, and also working to make sure that it's more accessible to all. So where I live, we have an amazing outdoor facility, but there's no benches. And if people have mobility issues, where are they going to stop? And they often then end up staying at home, and then that cycle of kind of being in a bad place continues. And I think having access to the outdoors is amazing for your mental health.
Definitely. Danisha, I'm so sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you for your answer though. And over to Councillor Joe Williams, please.
Thanks, Poppy. I think what this question highlights is that our society and the challenges that we're facing are very much linked. So the question is about the state of decline in nature and the impact on young people's mental health. So therefore, we need to ensure that young people are able to access prompt mental health provision and support. And that's a real challenge for us in Wales at the moment. We've got young people waiting for many, many months for access to mental health provision. So we need to have the support available, and then what we need to try and do is address the root issue, which is the decline in our nature and the amenities that are available. In a city, it can be a challenge, and what we need to do is we need to protect green spaces, and when we develop, we ensure that there are green spaces that are ring-fenced within new developments to ensure that young people, and indeed everyone in our community, is able to enjoy nature and nurture our environment and look after it for future generations.
Amazing, thank you very much. And Dewi Jones, over to you.
Well, any decision that's made by the Welsh Government in terms of planning or building new roads or whatever has to take into consideration the impact that that's going to have on future generations. It's called the Future Generations Act. Well, that needs to be extended to local governments as well. So any decision taken by local governments needs to consider what impact is this having on future generations, and also on nature and on wildlife. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that when developing anything, this needs to be at the forefront of our minds, and that young people do have access to these lovely, wonderful spaces. It was a policy in Plaid Cymru's manifesto for the Senate election last year to ensure that every person's got access to a green space within 5 minutes. That might be challenging in some cities, but it's something that we can aim towards. And if that is there as a law, then councils must react and must aim towards getting that. And it's definitely, there is a connection between being outdoors in nature and having positive mental health. So yeah, definitely it's very important.
Thank you very much. And over to Glyn.
Yeah, similarly, I'd just say it's about prioritising it across all sectors of local government, planning, economic development, so that councils and council officers are forced to make decisions which keep the climate and our ecological emergency in mind, and protecting the state of nature. There are some kind of really practical things that I'd love to do, such as like ban the use of pesticides by councils, invest more money in active travel, and spend more money on managing green spaces and woodlands. I think with regards to the mental health side of the question, it is no wonder that young people have kind of issues with their mental health in relation to climate and that kind of emergency that's obviously raging. And I'd just like to echo Joel's comments about needing to make sure that young people have access to mental health services in a prompt manner.
Fab, thank you so much for those answers. James, I'm going to hand over back to you to ask the next question.
Thank you. Yes. The next question is, in your personal life, have you done anything to tackle climate change?
Yes. So I was actually part of a delegation that went to the Vatican to highlight that how you can tackle climate change. I was right at the start, and about 8 years ago, I want to say, and it was about how we could use faith to help people understand that climate change is here, and we did that with so we marched upon the Vatican, and then the Pope released the encyclica, which was kind of like the Catholic response to climate change. And the idea was that we would use faith to help bring the idea of climate to the forefront. And then since then, I've also been a part of the Bhumi Project, which is a Hindu-based organisation that encourages people of Hindu faith to look at greening up their temples. We look at how you can live sustainably. We look at how you can grow food at home. So I have worked on projects like that, as well as when I was a student, I've done so many different voluntary programs. Like I did litter picking, I did river cleans, I've done tree planting, and in my ward as well, I've been leading on incentives like that. So we've been working with Keep Wales Tidy to have these biodiversity boxes placed in different parts of the ward so that we can encourage nature and as well as tree planting. So so we can just improve the environment as well as the climate.
Amazing, thank you. Keep Wales Tidy is a great organisation to work with. And Joel, over to you.
Well, I haven't flown on an aeroplane to the Vatican to campaign about the climate emergency. I've got an electric vehicle and I've had that for 6 years. So I think it's good as we are transitioning into electric. We should make it more accessible to the masses. I've also got a bicycle, and I do try and use that as a sustainable form of transport for getting around. I appreciate, though, that people in rural communities don't have access to good public transport. We don't even have access to it here in Cardiff. So what hope have our rural communities got? But in terms of making the adjustments, I think it's important that as politicians, we do try and lead by example. And one of the issues I highlighted, we declared a nature and climate emergency in Cardiff Council. And I think about 95% of councillors, including myself, drove to the meeting. We could have used public transport. We could have perhaps cycled and used other sustainable forms. So it's important that we practice what we preach. But hopefully I'm leading by example with my bicycle and my electric Renault Twizy. but I didn't go to the Vatican, unfortunately. I'll keep that on my bucket list.
I think that's an excellent thing to have on your bucket list. Dewi, over to you, please. What personal action have you taken?
Well, every day I travel about 50 minutes away to work. So a group of us, 4 of us, share a lift. So that's one thing probably. And also I've just installed new windows in my home. So hopefully that's going to keep it warmer, and I'm going to be using less energy. But that's very, very expensive, isn't it? So I think that there really is a need from the government to offer incentives for people to do this, because many people simply can't afford to take these measures. We really need to be supporting people to ensure that their houses keep warmth in, and they are so reducing the amount of energy that they're using. And that's especially prevalent now because of the rising cost of living, and many people are having to make many hard decisions. But I think it's great when people do take the responsibility on themselves, but I think the government does have a role in offering incentives so that people do make these decisions.
Excellent, thank you so much. And finally, over to Glyn.
I suppose I've been campaigning against an overtaking lane in my town, which the Welsh Government is trying to build despite being committed to end new road building. I have attended a couple of XR talks, though I wouldn't really describe myself as a rebel myself. One thing I would say is, I'd caution against individualizing this problem. That's not to do down people's, the work of individuals in their own lives, like eating less meat, etc. But I suppose what I would say is, I think Theresa May tried to salvage her legacy by banging on about plastic straws as though she was some kind of environmental campaigner. And actually, the real problem is that we're burning gas, we're burning coal, and actually it's that kind of political change, I think this is what Dewi was getting at, that needs to happen. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you. I think what you said there will definitely hit home with a lot of people watching this. So for the next few questions now, to mix it up, we're going to go in the reverse order. So Glyn, this question will be going back to you, and I think you've actually touched on this briefly already. And the question is, will you ban pesticide use by your local authority and stop using peat-based compost?
Yes, I have touched on that already. Definitely would like to ban the use of pesticides by the local authorities. I'm not sure under what circumstances peat-based composts are used, but that sounds pretty bonkers to me. So absolutely yes. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. Stuck to the time limit there. Now over to Dewi from Plaid Cymru. As a reminder, we are going in reverse order.
I think it's definitely something that I'd be willing to look into. I'm not going to sit here and claim to be an expert on peat-based compost or pesticides, but definitely it's something I would be up for researching into and looking at what effect this will have. Gwynedd is a pretty rural community, so we have lots of farmers here. So definitely we would have to look at how it's impacting them. But definitely there are also less harmful pesticides for the environment that we can use. So definitely encouraging them to use those. And if it's feasible, and looking at the science, seeing getting rid of the most damaging pesticides, definitely. But I'm not going to sit here and jump the gun and say, oh yes, definitely ban all pesticides. It's something we need to look at and have a conversation about. And it's something that's in general with the environment and nature, isn't it? It's important that we make informed decisions and that we have conversations on these issues.
Definitely, thank you. Joel, over to you. Same question, which is, in your local authority, will you ban pesticide use and stop using peat-based compost?
Well, I am, like Dewi, not an expert on pesticides and certain types of compost. And in a way, I wish I did have the power to bring in sweeping changes at Cardiff Council and improve residents, businesses, and organisations' lives for the better. But unfortunately, as individual councillors, we don't have that power. However, as Dewi has said, it's important that if these issues and requests do arise, we legitimately consider them and we provide reasons for any decisions that we would be taking. So it's important, it's been raised, and if it does come up, it's an issue that I would look to raise with council officers at the council and see if we can progress it.
Fabulous, thank you. And finally, Denisha.
Thanks, Poppy. Like Dewi said, I'm not an expert on this. I'm not sure what pesticides or whether or not we use peat-based compost. So I would need to try and see if we do, and then work a way to try and remove it from our system. So I understand that it's not great for nature. So we would probably need to look into alternatives if we do use it. I don't know if we do.
Thank you all very much for those answers to that question. I know that was a tricky one, and I think I can speak for the audience when we thank you for your honesty, but willing to listen to issues that impact the environment, especially Wales's rural and agriculture-based nature. So I'm now going to hand back over to James, who will be asking the next question to our panels this evening. Sorry.
Hello, yes. And my third question is, what would you do in your local area to help wildlife? Short and simple.
Yeah, so that question will be starting with
I think the questions are getting trickier. I suppose in every circumstance whereby nature or our climate or our environment were to feature in an issue in the council chamber, I'd be in favour of putting more money aside in order to be able to help our environment and our nature recover. In terms of personally, I'm not hugely sure. So I'll leave you with that honest answer, is that I don't know.
Thank you very much. Dewi?
Well, nature doesn't only belong to rural areas, it also belongs to urban areas, isn't it? So that's why in Gwynedd, we've actually done, not killing birds literally, but killing two birds with one stone. We've been saving money by cutting on the number of times a year we cut the grass, but that also helps the environment, doesn't it? What we've also done is been planting more wildflowers on the sides of roads. So I think it's called like curbside nature. So I definitely encourage more of that sort of thing to try and reintroduce biodiversity into our communities, whilst also saving the public purse some money. And also another thing that's been said in Gwynedd is the sides of the roads look much prettier now because we've got all these wildflowers. It's much prettier than just plain old green trimmed grass. So that's definitely one thing I would encourage and trying to get more of as well, and also bringing more green aspects into our town centres and city centres by planting flowers and plants. And in Carnarvon, where I live, there was a scheme where we gave local businesses free hanging baskets and that sort of thing. So maybe instead of the usual types of plants that are planted in those, that we look at the types of plants that help our pollinators and that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Fabulous, thank you. I especially like that you kind of pulled on the similarities, but also the similarities and differences that rural and more urban areas have in Wales. And now over to Joel.
Thanks, Poppy. So 60 seconds isn't long to talk about one of the things that we can do. So something that has been done in my ward of Pontpranine or St Mellons is the council worked with the local school and we planted wildflowers along a busy stretch of our community. And it's really good for the bees. So, you know, the bees are having a whale of a time. We've got wildflowers, they're pretty, they're gorgeous, and we're involving young people. So at the same time, we can tell young people the benefit of what we're doing. And then what we're seeing is they go home and then they tell mum and dad, and then we're having a conversation about making the right adjustments. One of the other things that I've asked for in Cardiff Council is vertical gardens. So in cities, we've got ugly walls and pillars for bridges. Why can't we put gardens and vertical plants on them? It would be great for the environment and it would be pretty. Unfortunately, it's not something that's been taken forward, but I'll continue to make the case for doing so.
Thank you very much. And finally, over to
Thanks, Poppy. As I mentioned at the start, in my ward, I've been working in the washeries, and that's part of the Cwmtaf Nature Network. And so we've been doing, I think, slightly different to what others have been saying about, you know, obviously we do tree planting across the borough. We've done a green canopy scheme where we've planted, I think, 20,000 trees throughout Bridgend. And we're also looking to plant more. And obviously we've done the whole reducing the mowing cycle of grass cutting. But one thing we've done in the washery site is actually let nature take back the site. And so often we don't need to maintain nature, and habitats form when we leave it alone. And so that's one thing that in my ward in particular we've done. So we've encouraged people to stick to paths as opposed to tread on what is wildflowers and habitats for creatures. We've so I think what we've done there is try to let nature take its course and to let it take over what it wants to take over. So I think that's a different way of doing it. But also when we're doing building schemes, we're also looking at how we can make them green. So in Porthcawl, we've got a big development happening there, and on top of the bus shelters, we've got green canopies, which they're not used spaces, and so we're planting schemes on them as well.
Amazing, thank you so much. Now, this next question is something that I especially feel very passionately about as someone who is still in traditional education as a Year 13 student. And it's, do you support the greater inclusion of environmental topics into the school curriculum? And I want to add on, do you not support the greater inclusion of environmental topics? So if we go to Glenn first, please.
Absolutely, and I think it's probably just about young people coming out of school as well-rounded individuals and ready to kind of critically engage with what they see on the news, and it's also about, you know, citizens, teaching young people to be kind of engaged citizens and willing to engage with elected officials in events like this, and engage with the political system as well, so that when people are casting their vote at the ballot box, they're doing so from a place of being informed about the choices that they're making.
Thank you very much for your answer, especially bringing in local elections and voting, which is obviously the theme of today's event. Now over to Dewi, please.
Yes, that's definitely something I want to see. So I'm myself a teacher, so I work with kids and young people every day, all day. And I think that they are genuinely interested in the environment and climate change and nature and all these things. So it's important that we embed these throughout the whole curriculum. And it's one of the cornerstones, if you want, of the new curriculum that's going to be coming in to force, is that we when kids leave education in Wales, that they are informed and they are world citizens. So it's very important that they know about their world, about the natural world as well, and that they're fully informed of the impact that's how they live their lives does have on nature, on our planet, and how it's going to affect their lives. Like I was saying earlier on, the need for pollinators so that we have food on our plates, and how nature plays a part in controlling things like flooding and wildfires and that sort of thing. So I believe that nature needs to be embedded throughout the whole curriculum. It's one of those key aspects that goes into creating well-informed world citizens.
Thank you very much for that answer. Joel, over to you.
Thanks, Poppy. Yes, absolutely. I think it's really important that people in our schools, children and young people, have access to impartial, factual information regarding our environment, our climate. And if there are conflicting views, it's very important that young people receive those conflicting views, because it's very important that we raise young people to be free thinkers and not necessarily to copy what I say or what any other panel member says, but they are informed citizens who can make up their own mind. And it's very important that environmental topics are discussed in our schools, colleges, and universities. So, yes to your question.
Thank you very much. And finally, over to Denisha.
Thanks, Poppy. And like all the other panelists, I would absolutely agree with the inclusion of environmental topics. I think for me, it's not just about the physical environment. I think the environment has a deeper impact on society. I think that the socioeconomic impact of the environment should also be looked at. Often people just think about the physical, and forest schools do an excellent job around trying to educate young people about the environment and how they can live sustainably with it. And I would have loved to have had forest schools when I was younger, because they help you with survival skills, and as well as get you used to what's around you and not make you fearful of it. But I do think the socioeconomic impact of the environment is something that we often overlook. And I think with the way the world is at the moment, we are going to see the impact of it. Even more so. We were talking earlier about. I think one of the panelists was talking about helping make his home more energy efficient. Some people can't afford that. And so I think that we have to have a conversation about how the environment is also, it has injustices within it. And so I know you've come back on screen, so I'll leave it there. But I just, so I think there's more to it, isn't it? And I think that those topics need to be discussed in school alongside the physical environment as well.
Definitely. Thank you very much for that answer. There's often a saying said at climate marches actually that climate justice is social justice, and I think that rings true now more than ever. Now I'm going to be heading over to our final question, so please candidates make sure that we stick to the time with this question, and this is quite a big and important question, I think, which is thinking more broadly, what direction should Wales be heading in regarding climate change? What should our strategy be? Now, that is a very big question for you guys to answer, and I'm going to be heading to Glenn first to answer
it. Well, I think the quite obvious answer is, we need to act, and we need to act much faster than we have been at the moment. And what that actually means is spending a lot of money. And creating incentives for people to do the right things, and actually that's about the state's role predominantly, and that's why at the last Senedd elections my party propose spending £1 billion on the climate over the Senedd term. I don't know if you can still hear me at this moment. I'm having a few issues.
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Oh, sorry. It's just that my camera's frozen, so I apologise about that. I think my answer. I think that is pretty much my answer. It's just that we need to demand of our electorate representatives that they spend more on the climate. Thanks ever so much.
Amazing, thank you very much. And finally,
a lot of the things that we've talked about tonight, although they're important, like planting wildflowers and whatever, great, yeah, they're lovely, but unfortunately, they're not really going far enough, are they? So that's why central government needs to step in. And if central government in Westminster isn't willing to do this, then they need to give the power to the Welsh government to do it. We need to be developing infrastructure in Wales in terms of transport, being able to travel from North Wales to South Wales, in a clean way, because I've got to admit I drive because it's quicker, it's cheaper, it's easier. Also, we've got to be developing sustainable ways of producing energy, not opening a new nuclear power plant in Anglesey like the Tories are planning on doing just to win the next election. We need to be looking at tidal, at wind, at wave energy. And the other thing with these big infrastructure projects is they also create jobs, don't they? They also act as a much needed stimulus to our economy. So there again, we're killing two birds with one stone. We're saving our environment, our climate, our nature, but we're also giving our people well-paid jobs and giving our young people training opportunities. So yeah, build these tidal lagoons, build these windmills.
amazing, thank you very much for your answer. And over to
thank you, Poppy. It's the time has flown. 1 hour, it's gone really quickly, and I've really enjoyed this hustings today. And we haven't bickered as politicians normally tend to. But I am going to have a little pop at Dewi there. It's really important that we ensure our nation's electricity security and utility security. And Dewi's absolutely right. Tidal, wind and solar is a very important aspect of our strategy moving forward, but so is nuclear. And it's important that we are not dependent on hostile states for our energy, and therefore we need to work about developing in-house. I think what the public want to see Wales do moving forward is for politicians to collaborate and work together and produce a strategy that we're all going to get behind to make the changes that we all know we need to make. And it's very important that politicians lead by example. In this particular issue, rank hypocrisy will do great harm to the changes that we need to see. We can't be having politicians flying around and driving here, there, and everywhere, whilst at the same time stopping the general public from doing so. We need to practice what we preach, and we need to stand by it, and we need to lead by example. But we need to work together.
thank you very much for your answer. And finally, over to Tanisha.
Thank you, Poppy. Yeah, very big question to finish off with, and I'll try to be a bit more general, I guess, in my approach. And I think that the strategy should be deep, it should be effective, it should be efficient, and I think it should be individualistic. So I think that not all there's not a quick fix to this. You know, each area deserves to have something that works for that area. So it could be electric vehicles, it could be generating ground source heat, it could be looking at avoiding waste, it could be looking at generating energy locally, locally grown food. I think it needs to almost be all things to all people. So it is a big ask for a strategy, but I know looking at the Future Generations and Wellbeing Act, I think that we have the ability in Wales to put forward a really good strategy. And so I will leave it there. But yeah, I think it does need to be, it needs to be here, it needs to be now, and it needs to be all encompassing.
Thank you very much for all of your answers tonight. I really appreciate the thought-provoking and passionate answers that everyone has given. So thank you again, and as a reminder to our audience, to Councillor Danisha Patel, who is running as a Labour candidate, Councillor Joel Williams, running as a Conservative candidate, Dewi Jones for Plaid Cymru, Glyn Preston for the Liberal Democrats. It's been incredible to hear your answers, and I hope that everyone in the audience has listened to this event and is feeling more empowered than ever to get out and vote, and if you have, register to vote. Now, in terms of taking part in these elections, this meeting is only the first step of that process. It's important that young voters can contact their candidates and ask questions, and so because of that, the Wildlife Trust has been working on a website, and I'm going to hand over to Rory to talk a little bit more about that. But thank you all so much. This has been a pleasure to host. As you've mentioned, there has been a significant little amount of bickering, and I very much appreciate that and all of your passion. So thank you for joining us today. Rory, over to you.
Thank you very much. And can I want to say a huge thank you to Poppy and to all of the candidates for taking part. It's been great. We've heard about some of the issues, and I hope it's encouraged everyone to take part and to use your vote. The aim, as Poppy said, of the Our Bright Future programme is to encourage young people to become skilled and engaged citizens and to make a difference. And this event has been part of that. Now, on the 5th of May, there are actually separate elections in 825 different wards around Wales. And the question is, how do you find out who's standing in your ward and what they stand for? So the second part of the campaign is going to be a website going live next week once all the nominations are processed. The Woodland Trust Wales website, wtwales.org. You'll be able to type in your postcode, see who your candidates are, and then email them a particular question, the sort of questions maybe that we've heard tonight. And the really great thing about it is not only does that give you more information on which to base your own decision, but it will give the candidates an idea about what voters, and particularly young voters, are interested in. Wouldn't it be great if hundreds of people used the website to ask questions of their candidates? Wouldn't that be a great message to send to our newly elected representatives? So please come back to the website next week, ask a question of the candidates, and then of course make your own decision. And as Poppy said, if you're not registered to vote, you've got until the 14th of April to do so, the Electoral Commission website. If you can't get to a polling booth on the 5th of May, you can apply for a postal vote. Again, go to the Electoral Commission website by the 19th of April. So thanks to everyone who's taken part. Thanks for your questions. Please come back to the website next week. Diolch yn fawr a nos da. Thank you very much and good night. I'm not sure what